Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to Blade Bias. I got my IEM strewn about, and maybe you'll see more of them soon. I have severe problems with money. Today, we will be talking about the Glidr Pacific because I'm sure you guys have realized, I'm sure you've wondered, I've had this thing for a little more than a week now. Now, that is mostly because I got this thing before the solar eclipse, and the solar eclipse was the start of just a hellish week for me in terms of like what I had going on. Just a ton of homework, the eclipse itself, and just a ton of other events that I had to attend to. So I told Ted, hey, this one might take a little bit longer. But I'm kind of glad that it did because the Pacific is, man, it is an enigma. From a company that I have loved for so long, and in theory should have been some of my favorite things from them, comes down to something that, in my opinion, comes so close yet is so far. So let's try and break that down as best as I can, shall we? So this is the Glidr Pacific. It comes in at 3.95 ounces. It runs on bushing steel washers and is made out of 6061 aluminum and runs for about $170-ish, featuring the NRB weights system itself. It is a balisong that on paper should have been one of Glidr's best yet. And I think it is one of Glidr's best yet, I'll be honest. I think if I look at this from a more objective standpoint, I do think this is Glidr's best balisong. I do think this beats out the Arctic. I do think this beats out the Antarctic. However, I just don't vibe with it that much. I have to be completely honest. This is where it comes in. It was so close, yet it was so far. Because on paper, this thing was amazing to me. Really grippy texture, very customizable with these weights, rounded handles, which I absolutely love, cool colorways, and just a more overall competitive balance and weight point, unlike what they used to provide with the Antarctic and the Arctic. Now, the Antarctic was good. It was just a little boring for me. And I didn't really get enough time to spend. I haven't flipped an Antarctic in a long time. So at this point, I don't even think my opinions on it would be up to date or, relevant in any single way. But I've always liked the Arctic, not because it's the best balisong ever, not because it's like just objectively amazing, but because I learned on it. I have a huge, it feels very, we're doing this again. We're doing this again, camera? Okay. Not because it's objectively the best thing ever, but because it's what I learned on and it's what I really, really like feel comfortable flipping. Objectively, this thing does not fit my preferences. It's heavier and it's more handle biased than I usually prefer, but even still, coming back to it is incredible. Mostly because of how finished it is. It is so round and comfortable. There's not a sharp edge on the Arctic. It feels genuinely incredible for the price that they were able to land it at, and it runs on bushings, which back in the day was such a huge, amazing, good deal. And now we come to the Pacific, which still feels good, but it loses that. Seriously? It loses that. Dude, this is ridiculous. I had this camera on for like 5-10 minutes, just kind of thinking about what I was going to do, and this has not happened once. So of course, as soon as I start recording, um anyway, the Pacific kind of loses out on that because this texturing and just it overall, it doesn't feel bad, mind you, but it just feels more in line with everything else on the market. It doesn't have that glider smoothness to it. And that, I guess, partially comes down to this grip that they put onto it, which I'm going to say is fantastic. I previously kind of thought that the Nakiri wasn't the best thing ever because of the grip that it had. It was too grippy for a titanium balisong. But I believe I said in that video, if you had grip like that on an aluminum balisong, it would actually feel quite good. And that's the Pacific. This texture is like sandpaper. It is so rough, but it grips into your fingers so well. Specifically on something like choker fans, you're going to feel it. This thing will not come out of your hands because the aluminum is slippery. No way. When you're spiraling in the choker fan, it just wants to keep pulling up into your fingers, and it's so good. It's so nice. And you combine that with the rounded handles, and it just fans so well. And man, I really want to love this thing. So I think this is one of the grippiest aluminum balisongs out there, genuinely. I think this thing just doesn't fly out of your hands for grip reasons. And it's one of the only aluminum balisongs that I can say that on. Yeah, it's just genuinely great. Everything about this is genuinely great. Except for the balance. I cannot get over the balance on this thing. It's similar to the Nikiri when I said I just never could get it to a place where I was like comfortable flipping it. And especially because it was a live blade, that was a huge problem. But this is the exact same way. Despite how customizable the Pacific is with these weights that you can put in, with these zippy inserts that he offers, I was never able to get it to a point where I felt as comfortable flipping this as I felt flipping anything else. In fact, and this is kind of how crazy it is, I would rather flip, I feel more in control and more comfortable with my live blade Sliff T than I do the Pacific, just because it fits my preferences so much more and I'm able to, dial it in to something that I'm comfortable with, despite the fact that it's a live blade and I'm completely out of practice with them. This thing just it never clicked with me. It never felt right, And I think that's just because of the incredible weight at the bottom of the handles. This thing goes from no momentum whatsoever to the most handle biased feeling thing that you've ever felt. And the weight is so focused at the end of the handles that, dude, this is 3.95 ounces, right? Base. This is 4.01. And I would have bet money if you asked me that the Pacific was heavier. That's how confident I feel in that. This thing feels so heavy because it carries so much momentum at the end of the handles. Those steel weights are not helping it whatsoever. They're just helping it feel heavy and sluggish, much like a Madco, some might say. The closest I was able to come was with this profile. This is with the zippy weights in, and this is the smaller weights. The big weights were way too much momentum for me, way too much handle bias. And without any weights, it just didn't carry any momentum whatsoever. Even the blade, if you take these zippy weights out, the blade just feels like it's got nothing to give. It's much like other Glidr products in that it feels like all of the weight is in the handles and it just wants to be a handle bias balisong. But the problem is they're obviously trying to hit a more, standard flipping experience here. So it almost feels like they're trying too hard because they just don't hit that. It feels like a typical Glidr handle bias balisong, but it's in this package that is so good. Like everything else about this, I love, but flipping it, I just don't. And I want to be clear, it's okay. This is not, I don't think this is a bad balisong by any means, but given what price it's at, I would pick most anything else in the price range, especially something like a Prisma Pro or even a Wing, I'll be honest. For being $40 less, the Wing is just far more comfortable to me. It feels more coherent. The Pacific is just so end weighted in its handles that it's almost comical. There's no in between. The handles are either dead with no momentum or they carry too much. I wish there was an in between with these weights, but there's just not. So it ends up being a little disappointing, honestly. I wish I could have liked this thing a lot more. I will say, if you do get one and you feel the same way that I do, the zippy weights helped it quite a bit. This balance that I'm running, again, with the small weights and the zippy inserts, it's close. I've warmed up to it over the time that I've had it, but unfortunately that warm-up period has hit a plateau, and it no longer feels like I'm warming up to it. So if you feel the same way I do about this thing, the zippy inserts might help, but I think it's just too much Glidr in a not so glider package. Like it feels like if in a different company's hands, this design would have went crazy. Minus the blade. I think the blade genuinely has issues with momentum and weight. Because the balance is just all goofy with the blade. But yeah, I don't know. I was a little disappointed, or I am a little disappointed with the Pacific. And I do want to be clear again. It's fine. Like, I think this flip's okay. And I think there's some people out there who are really going to like this. I've seen some people out there who do really like this. But for me, the fact that it's so customizable, much like the Nikiri, and I wasn't able to dial it in to the same way, like to the preference point that I have, is pretty disappointing. And it's just kind of going to be a big old pass for me. I'll stick with my Arctic, even though I do think this is a better flipper than the Arctic for sure. But compared to everything else in its price range, I don't really know. I'm just not into like the really heavy end of the handle momentum carrying experience. If you are into that, then that's great. Maybe you should check this thing out. So those are my complicated thoughts on the Pacific. I love literally everything about it except the balance. I think they came so close to creating a trainer that quite frankly would have rivaled the Prisma Pro for my favorite trainer in this price range, but with how much weight is at the end of these handles, or none at all. Again, there's no in between in my opinion. It's too much or too little. I can't really say that I enjoy it too much. Do I recommend it? Maybe. It depends on what your preference point is. But as much as I was kind of harping on the community for saying, oh, it's not worth it, I do think this is a case where the flipping performance just isn't making up for the fact that the thing is just not like super amazing in my opinion. I don't know. I'm so conflicted. Because like I've said, I love everything about these handles. I love how round they are. I love the grip on it. But I think the blade is letting it down, and I think the amount of momentum that it's carrying is letting it down. So it's a little bit of a disappointing product for me, unfortunately. So that's going to do it for the Glidr Pacific. Thank you all very much for watching. Thank you to Ted for sending this thing out. No disclaimer, Glidr didn't send this one for free. Ted did, and I have to send it back to him. So I'll go do that. And until the next one, I hope you guys enjoy your day. Have a good one.